Hey guys, back with a video, and this time I'm reacting to India and Pakistan, a continuing story by Kraut. So, let's give it a watch. I've been recommended this video, and should be interesting, India and Pakistan.
Cars dominate the world of personal transport. The industry sectors built around them are so large that they are their own category of geopolitical.
Bit unfortunate that, though. We need more public transportation.
Power players. For the first half of the 20th century, the Americans dominated that market. They invented the concept of the assembly line, at which the car could be put together out of small parts stored at factories, making said car cheaper for an even...
Yeah, and I think a German invented the car itself, the automobile. But I'm not sure. But yeah, I think so. But yeah, the Americans sort of invented the assembly line.
Larger market.
Sort of. At least they used it to great effect. I'm not sure if they actually invented it, but yeah.
Then came post-war Japan. In the 1960s, they invented a new manufacturing approach called just-in-time production, or demand-dependent production. Instead of having every part of every vehicle made and stored in the same factory, all parts were made separately in different factories by different...
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense in what we're doing now. As long as you have everything standardized and, put to the same measurement, then it should be alright to do this.
Competing businesses around the country
and better quality
to demand. The decentralized yet coordinated system lowered production costs as well as surplus costs. This system was so efficient it made Japan the biggest car manufacturer in the world by 2000 and was copied by everyone else. The reason it worked so well is because Japan is one of the best internally integrated countries in the world. At the core of a functioning economy lies the supply chain, which is the chain a product or resource goes through to get from supplier to producer to the customer. The aluminium goes from the mine to the plant, to the harbor, to the ship, to the engineer, to the assembly line, to the ship, to the customer. For that process to run smoothly, what you require is a good internal integration. The less barriers, the smoother the supply chain runs, the more efficient the production process. Japan has some of the best infrastructure in the world, some of the best educated supply chain management in the world, and the foreign policy built on eliminating trade barriers, allowing
Well, I don't know about that. I mean, they can't even... maybe they're diplomats, but the population doesn't really speak English that well.
For suppliers, manufacturers, and customers to be smoothly integrated into one functioning system. Internal integration is important to business management, which is why many who study economics study to become supply chain managers. And the process of internal integration is also important to the functioning of a state. Nations, however, face a far greater challenge in internal integration than just economic. France is not French. There are dozens of languages.
True, yeah. And just several years ago, many years ago, there used to be many other languages and regional variations of French in France. So, like in the south of France, you had Occitan. It was another language related to French. And yeah, it was very popular until metropolitan France sort of overtook it. So nowadays you have a lot of metropolitan France in the south of France, and Occitan is kind of fell out of favor. Still spoken though, but of course. And so yeah, these regional languages have fallen out of favor, and sometimes they're still around, but most of the time they got replaced. So it's a bit unfortunate, but also France wants to centralize everything. And it's cool because France actually had different languages, not just different dialects, but different languages pretty much. Although, I mean, in the end, you could say the same for Italy as well.
Spoken in France by various...
Although not to such a large degree, I think. But they do have more varieties in regional languages, but France sort of centralized everything more than Italy.
Unique cultures all around the country. The language we know as French evolved out of the use of Latin in urban centers of administration under the Romans. This intertwined with Gallic dialects over the centuries, developing a Gallo-Romanic language family. But also saw new Germanic languages arrive through the Frankish conquest. In Brittany, people kept speaking Breton, an old Celtic language that has more in common with Welsh. Gascon.
Well, no, they didn't keep speaking that. Actually, it's sort of people from the British Isles actually went back to Brittany or Bretagne, and yeah, they sort of settled that region again. Of course, there probably were Celtic people that stayed there as well, but also Celtic people from like Cornwall and some other like places like Wales and the British Isles. They went to that area of northwestern France and they settled it. So yeah, it's actually pretty interesting.
Lotharingian, Catalan, Basque, and Corsican are all languages that were widely spoken in regions of France and still are. For most of its history, this didn't matter, as France's governing power came through "we have a king. The king is absolute and rules all of you because God says so." Then came a change in management. And with that change in management came a need to find a new way of holding all of this together despite its differences in culture, language and peoples, for which the new management chose a policy of lingual integration. French, as previously spoken mainly in urban centers, became the central language of administration, academia and culture. We are French because we all speak French, and through being spread across lingual barriers internally integrated what we now know as France. Internal integration is not always possible. An island can't rule a continent. It can also fail. Declaring someone part of a union doesn't make it so, just because you wish for it. And there is no geographical region that is as badly integrated internally as the Indian subcontinent. The landmass we now know as India drifted away from the African continent 90 million years ago and crashed into Asia around 50 million years ago. And it keeps pushing itself into it, creating the world's largest mountain range, which for its part drastically reshaped Asia. The mountains prevent rain clouds from the Indian Ocean from reaching Central Asia, consequently causing the vast steppes and deserts there, as well as generating an annual rain season known as the monsoon. The constant downpours and glaciers of the Himalayas caused several rivers to flow from them into the Indus Valley and the Brahmaputra plains. The Indus, the Jhelum, the Chenab, the Ravi, the Beas, the Sutlej and the Saravasti. This large river landscape combined with large flood zones made India, just like so many other large river delta regions, an ideal place for early agriculture-based settlement and civilizations, which culminated in the Indus Valley civilization. Across the subcontinent, many independent kingdoms formed around the river cities, by 600 BC known as the 16 Majapadas, mainly situated along the Ganges River Valley. This established a tradition of small local rulers who built small kingdoms throughout the Indian subcontinent, who all competed in trying to expand their influence and power over that subcontinent. What they would be called would change over the centuries, yet many of their castles still stand to this day, and in many of these castles, the descendants of those kings still live their lives in an India that is now without an emperor or king. Yet the various provinces of India to this day remain in contention with
Damn, those are some cool symbols.
The central federal government. Power struggles between central power structures and regional power centers are common in India's politics throughout its history. And throughout the last 2000 years, ruling all of this, one of the most fertile and rich lands on this planet, became a prospect.
Yeah, India might just be able to do better as separate countries inside of the Indian subcontinent. If it was all separate countries, it might be able to do better. Like Europe, smaller countries can focus their energy and money better to do certain things, and it would spread the people out more. And generally, smaller countries do better. They can take care of their population better. They use their money better, and they come up with more technological solutions instead of relying on manual labor. But big countries also have their advantages as well. But it is harder to industrialize if your country is so big. Maybe if India was tiny little states and they all industrialized, and then they could form an EU.
That many, both internal as well as external, tried to take it all. Throughout its history, there were 6 unifiers of the subcontinent: the Mauryan Empire, the Gupta Empire.
Mauryans are super interesting. Look it up if you're at all fascinated by India. The Mauryan Empire was awesome, and Ashoka, awesome.
And the Republic of India were all internal unifiers. The Delhi Sultanate, the Mughal Empire, and the British Raj were of external origin.
Yeah, they were of external origin, and these three were of internal origin. So yeah, 3 internal and 3 external.
Before the British, those who sought to invade the Indian continent always came through the same region. At the Himalayas' westernmost tip, at the Badakhshan Highlands, the impassable Himalayan mountain range gives way to smaller ranges such as the Hindu Kush Mountains, from which the land gradually flattens out into fertile plains in Afghanistan and Persia. This corridor is the main route through which outside conquerors, be they Persian, Greek, Mongol, but mainly Turkic, launched their invasions of the subcontinent. It, therefore, comes as no surprise that this region, which today is split up between Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iran, India, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, is of vital interest in the security and trade of the inhabitants of the Indian subcontinent, and therefore still a source of conflict. The British, as always, came by sea, initially not as a nation, but as a company, to establish a trade factoria to build networks for goods.
Yep, and they stole 40 trillion something USD from India. How freaking unfortunate. India is owed a lot by Britain. Oh man. Probably more specifically the UK. Probably more specifically England. But yeah. Just, Britain really messed up India.
They were, however, not alone. After the French were kicked out of India, the East India Company took French
Pondicherry in that region.
possessions as well as the lands of Bengal, whose ruler had sided with the French and lost. The British created the Bengal Presidency, and from there started a process of gradually taking control of the entire subcontinent. They did so by taking advantage of conflicts between the Marathas and the Mughal Empire, Persian conflicts with the Mughals, and established a system of tributaries. This colonial rule of India was, however, very different from all previous and
and after the Marathi, so. It's unfortunate though. On Bengal, the region that they took over from was super, super prosperous. They had one of the largest GDPs in the world. And, Britain ruined that. They were industrializing, but Britain stopped that and ruined everything in that region. Bengal was prosperous, but yeah, and Winston Churchill, who we think of as such a good guy, he let millions of Bengalis and Indians starve during the World War. So yeah, Winston Churchill, fuck that guy, and also yeah, damn.
Other entities that had united India. It was first and foremost managed by a corporation, namely the East India Company. Where previous conquerors had made the subcontinent their new home, the East India Company was there to profit and take its
they were just bleeding India dry. It was the engine of the British Empire.
Resources and wealth for a place on the other side of the globe. This corporate profit-motivated rule was ruthless, cold, and brutal, with close to little regard for the needs and well-being of those subjected to it. The beginning of company rule in Bengal coincided with a famine in the wider region, to which the East India Company did not react with attempting to bring relief, but by raising the company-enforced taxes to ensure that the company profits would still rise despite the crop failures, thereby exacerbating the famine. The profit motive politique eventually led to a rebellion that would bring about the end of company rule, after which the British simply annexed India, made the British monarch
That's not good, though. That's not good.
And established a viceroy. But India still remained first and foremost a colony that existed to have its riches plundered for the profit of a faraway land. And that profit motive remained deeply
fuck Britain.
Ingrained in how the subcontinent was governed. In 1870s.
British people need to learn about this in school. What they did, how they messed up so badly.
The monsoon failed again, and India was gripped by a famine again. A famine that would end up being so large that it would cost the lives of 5 million Indians. And while it was ongoing, the British Viceroy of India, Lord Lytton, refused relief as he sold the remaining rice and grain. He justified this by arguing that the famine was part of free market forces that were naturally destroying the uncompetitive Indian rural peasantry. It was measures like these that contributed to an already existing widespread resentment towards British rule amongst the Indian public, creating
sense.
a protest and self-determination movement that also happened to fall into a global era of nationalism and self-determination. From China to Anatolia to Egypt to the Balkans, movements were birthed that generated new identities. And in India, an idea was born that saw India as more than just a subcontinent of different peoples and faiths, but as one nation and one society. During the Second World War, 2.5 million soldiers from the Indian subcontinent found themselves fighting a war against tyranny, from Singapore to Hong Kong, in Egypt, Libya and Tunisia, in Italy, in Ethiopia, in Malaysia and Burma. They fought, suffered and gave their lives in the hundreds of thousands for the freedom of others, but not their own. While their homeland had to endure another famine in 1943. That war fought for freedom made the hypocrisy of a British-occupied India blatantly obvious to all, and the continuation of the British Raj untenable. Internal and outside pressures started to mount on Britain to get out. But as they got out of India, they would arguably leave behind some of the worst damage done to the subcontinent. Possibly the worst of all colonial.
Their leaving was not very stable.
Legacies. At the beginning of the independence movement, the vision that had brought people together was one of a united India. You can see this represented in the flags of the movement. A society not divided by its many cultures, languages and faiths, but one republic for all. That vision was represented by the eventual founder of the Indian Republic, Jawaharlal Nehru. But
then they partitioned India. Oh, damn. That really messed it up. And also, Nehru was terrible. Nehru was absolute dog shit. Fuck Nehru.
But it is a vision that was challenged by the leader of the Muslim League, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, the eventual founder of the Pakistani Republic. Jinnah believed that in a united subcontinent, the Muslims would as a minority get the short end of the stick, and that therefore the Muslims of India would need their own state. The British eventually agreed to his demand.
There's still so many Muslim people in India, though, that are not in Pakistan or Bangladesh, so yeah, that's already not really a feasible idea, so.
And drew lines as.
And it just creates this sort of competition between them that is sort of unhealthy. Sometimes competition can be very healthy, but this competition between Pakistan and India is not healthy.
Borders that in retrospect didn't make much sense.
And Bangladesh having that region just kind of
They ripped apart communities, cut ethnic groups and cultures into different countries,
so
and
many
stripped
people
the
died.
Sikhs of their ancient capital and holy sites. The British
the Sikh people, man.
British were given only 11 weeks to get out by their government. That hasty, unorganized retreat resulted in abhorrent violence and ethnic cleansings that cost the lives of up to 2 million people and caused the second largest refugee crisis in human history, as 14 million Sikhs, Muslims and Hindus fled into a new country by leaving their home behind. Two visions stood at the end of India's independence, and there were many that came to challenge them. The Republic of India, founded by Nehru, the vision being of a united republic of differing peoples, cultures and faiths, united for common benefit and struggle in one society, a nation in which it would not matter that Hindus were the majority, because the concerns of all would be given equal weight and precedence in a new secular republic.
That sounds good. Secular republic, yes.
The Republic of Pakistan, which is easily confused today for being intent as an Islamic state. But that was not the vision of its founder Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Jinnah's ideal was what he had seen in Ataturk's Turkey, the creation of
Oh man, that would have been amazing. But you still should not have separated, so you kind of caused that, if you separate, you cause that mistake. Although Ataturk's Turkey, amazing. But yeah, damn.
New modern national identity in which the peoples would be Pakistani
Look up Ataturk. An amazing man.
First, Muslims second, and although mostly Muslim, it was supposed to have a place for those who were not. The Pakistani Republic started with a Hindu Minister of Justice who presided over the first constitutional session,
That's
meaning
cool.
that his signature, the signature of a Hindu, was the first on Pakistan's constitution. The Indian Republic also started with Muslim members of government, but both their visions would be challenged from Islamic extremism in Pakistan to Hindu fanatics in India. And in one of the two, the founding vision would die soon after the Republic's founding.
Unfortunate. And there is a lot of Pakistani extremism, unfortunately. I mean, I just find that the Hindus, well, not necessarily the Hindus, but Indians in general, are a bit more accepting.
Pakistan is an acronym: Punjab, Afghan, Kashmir, Indus, Sindh, and the Tan represents Balochistan. It was supposed to represent a unification.
Yeah, but Balochistan or Balochistan should be free. Free Balochistan, I think. That'd be a good idea.
Of all these people into a new national identity. But the name itself almost stands like a metaphor for the disunity of the country. The region of Punjab is divided between Pakistan and India. Punjab is the historical homeland of the Sikhs, and its capital, Lahore, was the ancient capital of the Sikh kingdom. Lahore was once the most diverse city on the Indian subcontinent, a place known for its culture, wealth, and learning. Its Sikhs and Hindus were driven out when the city fell into Pakistan. The scar of the ethnic and sectarian separation and cleansings sits deep in the first letter. The borders between Afghanistan and Pakistan were drawn not by Jinnah or by the Afghans, but by the British after attempts to conquer.
And they drew terrible lines.
It is called the Durand Line, named after a British colonial administrator. And just like all the other colonial borderlines named after colonial...
I don't know why they didn't redraw it, but I mean, they probably didn't really have the power to redraw it.
Administrators everywhere in the world, it is a disaster that makes close to no sense. Drawn after an Afghan-British war to determine what belongs to Britain and what belongs to Afghanistan, it cuts straight through Pashtunistan. The Pashtun people were historically never part of the Indian subcontinent, but of Afghanistan. This loose border that cuts straight through a people and culture would end up being the source of some of Pakistan's worst internal conflicts. Kashmir is for most not even part of Pakistan, so the country...
Yeah, Kashmir is part of India.
...is partially named after a part of the country that isn't even part of the country. The Indus River is the most important lifeline of the Pakistani nation. It's also important to the founding of a new national myth, as it is the region where the first Indian civilization came to be. There is no ancient historical reference point for any nation that one could call Pakistan. And the Indus River, as important as it is for the Pakistani economy and life, is also one of the country's biggest strategic liabilities, because the origin of the river is in India. More on that later. Sindh, just as Punjab, is scarred land marked by the displacement of the Sindhi Hindus and Sikhs, as the historical region is also divided with India, of which the Indian parts are now part of Rajasthan and Gujarat. Balochistan. Balochistan has close to no historical cultural connection to India. The Baloch people, language and culture are Persian Turkic. Historically, the Baloch people were part of the Kalat Khanate, a Turkic-Mongol kingdom with a Khan that was part of the Durrani Empire based in Afghanistan.
They should be their own country.
To this day, the Baloch people see their identity and belonging as an independent, self-determined people, and not as part of the 20th century construction that is Pakistan. And then, there's also what's missing. When Pakistan was founded, it was a divided nation.
Which doesn't even make sense, it's so weird.
Between West and East Pakistan. When Ataturk founded his republic, he built it on the basis of an extensive Turkification of the Anatolian region. Jinnah attempted the same, chose Urdu as the national language, and attempted to create a national identity based on the cultural practices and identities of the Muslims of the western part of the subcontinent.
Jinnah had good, sort of good intentions, but messed up.
The people of East Pakistan, however, are Bengal. They speak Bengali, their culture was different, and as Pakistan made no space for them, the disintegration was furthered by the enforcing of a foreign language, foreign culture, and foreign rule upon a people. The cracks in the Pakistani Republic appeared within the first years. Its first Hindu minister, meant to show that there was a place for a Hindu in this state, left the country in protest, proclaiming that it was no place for non-Muslims. Within 2 years, the Pakistani constitution was amended to declare government office an Islamic duty.
Damn, that sucks. Ugh. Don't mix religion and politics. Keep it secular. Separation of state and church, just like France. Just like France's laïcité. Keep them separate.
Excluding non-Muslims from many offices. And in
Don't make it
1974,
theocratic,
those cracks were widened when the Second Amendment to the Pakistani Constitution was passed, which declared
Oh, man. Damn.
Sunni Islam the only recognized faith of the state, thereby declaring all Shias, Ahmadiyya and Sufis to be apostates, and also enshrined non-Muslims in the state to not being people with inalienable rights and fellow citizens, but merely as tolerated outsiders. The last shreds of what the initial vision for the state was came crashing down in 1977, when during a military coup, Zia al-Haq seized power.
We started off from a point which, in my opinion, was most pertinent from the point of view of impact on the society. And impact on society, in my opinion, is from laws which look a little stringent.
Many people say that the Islamic punishments that you have instituted are in fact barbaric.
Islamic punishments, Sharia law, fuck that. God damn it. Ugh, terrible. You can't put religion into freaking politics and government. Just don't. All right, it's terrible. Are we in the 21st century? Get that religion out of here. Come on, get religion out of government and politics, please.
Inhuman, and in fact contravene the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. What would you say?
No, I would say that these punishments are just right. They're not barbarian. They're not against the human rights. But
how can you say that, sir?
Fuck this guy.
I give you, because there are these serious punishments like stoning a man to death, chopping off a hand, or the lashes.
Barbaric.
The
Are we
lashes
still in the medieval period? Or still in ancient times? No, we're not. Come on, what are we doing?
are also being administered scientifically.
We filmed in Saudi Arabia a flogging which was just a tapping which was to humiliate.
Yes.
What is happening here is different.
Yes, but what has happened here so far has not happened under the Islamic laws. It has happened under the martial law.
How can you say that you don't contravene the Declaration of Human Rights if you stone somebody to death or you chop off somebody's hand? There's a case coming up in Multan, for instance.
It has already been through, practically.
Has the hand been amputated?
Not yet. It will be.
Sharia law is not for modern society. Seriously, it's not. Like, Sharia law is not. It's not really moral or ethical. It's not good. Don't take word for word everything from the religious text. It's not good. The religious texts say some crazy shit.
Most people would call that inhuman.
Yes, but this is the way of life. This is the way of
No, fuck that.
thinking. I think it is absolutely within the rights of human beings.
Be logical and rational. That's not right.
Because if today we can reform the society by some stringent measures, I think it'll put them right.
Is it a reforming society?
This is my way of thinking.
Zia al-Haq made Sharia the law of the land, the cutting off of arms, censorship for media, a rape victim needing to provide free male witnesses to her rape or else she would be sentenced to death for adultery. It is one of only 2 countries in the world where a woman could be sentenced to being raped. Pakistan went through an extreme Islamization. The 1970s were
Yeah, it made it worse. Radicalization.
a time of revitalized Islamist
Moderation is key.
extremism throughout the Middle East, the consequences of which we still live with to this day. Throughout Egypt, Syria, Morocco and many other countries, these Islamic extremists were locked into jails as the countries made attempts to somehow get rid of them. Zia al-Haq imported these people that other countries
Oh man, you might just have to. Well, just keep them in prison for life and make sure they don't escape. Maybe you have to kill them. Maybe the only way.
were trying to get rid of, because he saw them as the foundation for building a new Islamic conservative nation. The consequences of this decision were catastrophic. India's post-independence journey was also filled with struggles to maintain its founding vision. The legacy of a caste system, religious differences and fanaticism, and deep inequality between rich and poor were its main struggles. From independence to 1990, India went through 4 big anti-Muslim riots and massacres. Hindu nationalism frequently challenges the founding vision of the republic. During the 1980s, the Sikhs found themselves to be the victims of anti-Sikh riots throughout the country. The deep-seated inequality between rich and poor could not be leveled through extensive social programs, and India to this day plays roughshod with its environment and consequences.
Yeah, they really do. I think they need from a young age in schools to just clean up after themselves, and instill a clean policy in life, And then, I think if we all cleaned up after ourselves, that would help.
The safety of millions. But throughout all of this, India is a place where Muslims became presidents, billionaires, and influential members of a society in which fundamentally they are legally recognized as equals. 20 years after the
India is the largest democracy.
Sikh riots that killed thousands, a Sikh would become prime minister. We should not forget, even as the current harmony is being challenged by a revitalized political force of exclusion, discrimination, and bigotry, that unlike Pakistan, the vision on which the Indian Republic was built has prevailed. India still is a secular republic.
Awesome.
As long as they can keep it. The favorite political pastime on the subcontinent for the past 70 years has been to try to undermine and harm your neighbors. Pakistan and India fought 4 wars. Both countries constantly try to undermine each other. Both countries are nuclear powers, and the subcontinent is currently the most likely source for a nuclear war. Most wars have been
If only Pakistan was not a nuclear power.
fought over the region of Kashmir, a Muslim-majority province that used to have a Hindu king. Pakistan lays claim to it because of its Muslim majority, and India because the Hindu king ceded the province to India. In 1962, China invaded to take the northern part of Kashmir from India, which it did to secure its Himalayan borders. And that intervention sort of reveals the actual reason for why there is conflict in that region. Because most Kashmiris, when polled, don't want to be either part of India or of Pakistan. They want independence. And all parties...
And of course they're not going to be able to, which is really, really unfortunate. Wish it was a bit more like Europe, where smaller countries could thrive, Too bad they can't be independent. But I'd rather have them be part of India. And Pakistan is sort of in China's pocket as well, so it's not that great. And the whole China and India scuffle and all that Himalayan region and stuff has not always been China's, so, Oh well, hopefully India can prevail and come out on top.
In this conflict simply ignore this because Kashmir is a key element in the subcontinent's tradition of the politics of antagonizing each other. The Indus River is the single most important geographical feature of Pakistan. It's the country's lifeline, its fresh water supply, and the backbone of its agriculture and population centers. However, the Indus does not originate in Pakistan, but in Kashmir. So do the 3 most important tributary rivers to the Indus as well: the Jhelum, the Chenab, and the Sutlej. 4 of the most important rivers of Pakistan have their origin in Indian-controlled land. For you to understand the significance of this, here's a brief intermission on rivers.
Sounds a bit like the Himalayas in Tibet.
Rivers are great suppliers of fresh water and nutrition. Rivers are also great borders that limit expansion significantly. And rivers are a great means of transportation. This means that nations that have rivers running through them can project power downstream along the river. In short, if you have a river running through your land, you are at the mercy of those upstream. And by controlling Kashmir, India can project power down 4 major rivers into Pakistan. India is currently constructing several dam projects, not just for hydroelectric power, but to divert drinking water away from Pakistan. This is an extremely precarious situation for Pakistan, which in return does anything it can do to destabilize Kashmir as much as possible. On the other hand, India can also not allow Kashmir to fall into Pakistani hands, since the hills and lowlands of Jammu lead straight into the population centers of Indian Punjab. Both sides hate each other too much to give up a strategic advantage over the other. The conflict over Kashmir is therefore not really a religious conflict, but a conflict over strategic positioning over the other, and Kashmir finds itself squeezed between the two to this very day.
And Ladakh as well. Hopefully Ladakh stays stays in India's hand though. Stays, because Ladakh it should be Indian. Yeah.
The previously mentioned disparity of identity between East and West Pakistan developed into an ever-heating tinderbox throughout the 1950s and 1960s, which eventually blew into open war and the worst atrocity of the Indian-Pakistani conflict. The West Pakistani attempt to force their culture, language and dominance over East Pakistan over 2 decades had the exact opposite effect. The people of Bengal doubled down and identified more and more with their culture and language. A movement of educated young people started to emerge, demanding increasing autonomy or possibly even independence, questioning how a country split in two over such distance could even continue.
Although that region used to be more like East Asian and more like Mongoloid. The people there used to be East Asian looking, but over time the Indian sort of people, Indian and Dravidian people moved into the region. So it's interesting.
Pakistan responded with the establishment of Islamist militias through the Islamic fanatic party Jamaat-e-Islamiyah, making lists of intellectuals and educated Bangladeshis, and then conducted a purge of society. University professors, university students, lawyers, judges, politicians, doctors, high school teachers, engineers, and anyone with a resemblance of education was hunted down and murdered together with thousands more of innocent people. We do not know the number of how many were killed. The estimates range from 300,000 to 3 million. This Bangladeshi genocide of 1971 would go down as the worst atrocity in the post-independence subcontinent. In the resulting fighting, the Indian army eventually intervened on the side of the Bangladeshi independence.
Yeah, of course, that makes sense. Holy crap, yeah.
Movement, helping Bangladesh achieve independence. But the consequences of what happened in 1970.
I mean, honestly, Bangladesh may as well have just joined India, joined back with India.
21 still show their effects to this day. Brain drain is when a country's best educated leave for better prospects abroad. That process harms domestic society and culture. Bangladesh, however, suffered not just a brain drain, but a brain extermination at the hands of the Pakistanis. Entire generations of educated people were murdered, leaving a massive education void in the country, which in return reduced the spread and quality of education in Bangladesh. Bangladesh to this day struggles with extreme poverty as a result. An estimated up to 30 million Bangladeshis work illegally in India to escape.
Oh man, and you know what? They used to have such a better reputation, like way in the past. And like the region of Bengal and that whole region was super rich. And damn, really.
The extreme poverty at home and relations.
Pakistan messed up Bangladesh, damn.
Between India and Bangladesh are frosty at best, as can be seen by the longest border wall in the world, which India built between it and Bangladesh.
Although there are a lot of Bangladeshis kind of crowding into India, which is kind of annoying. I mean, they can sort of improve their own country as well instead of just going to India. But
terrorism is the dumbest game.
They're kind of doing a population displacement in the surrounding regions of Bangladesh.
Country can play, and if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Every single time a government believed that giving weapons and support to a group of fanatical ideologues who are willing to kill for their delusions was a good idea, it backfired. But for some reason, the people of the Indian subcontinent don't learn that lesson, even though they won the resulting stupid prizes for 50 years, and nobody plays that stupid game as much as Pakistan. But why? In the 1970s, a splinter group of the Indian Communist Party known as the Naxalites split off from the party. Yes, I know you thought that I would be talking about the Taliban, but there is something you most likely don't know unless you are from India. The largest terrorist organization in the world isn't Islamist, neither is it nationalist or right-wing. The largest terror group in the world is a communist terror group in India called the Naxalites. With between 10,000 to 30,000 members, it's the largest in the world.
But I mean, there are a lot of Indian people to join the group in the first place, so I don't know if that's the best representation of. I don't know if that's the best way to say, oh, it's so large because there's just so many people to join.
On the eastern coastline of India, where it engages in attacks on government institutions, the police, businesses, the murder of politicians, police officers, and business owners. They came into existence during the 1960s, when they were largely supported by Mao Zedong to destabilize India. But after Mao died, it was Pakistan that jumped in to supply weapons and supplies with the sole purpose of destabilizing India. There's no ideological alignment. If you were to try to be a communist in Pakistan, you will most likely end up at the end of a rope. But the Naxalites were a useful tool to keep India in trouble. Within the area in which Naxalite terrorists are active, a substantial amount of India's aluminium, steel, iron, cement, and other resource-based industries are based. The Naxalites attack these industry plants and mines, disrupt the economy, and are the main reason for continuing economic underdevelopment and lack of industrialization in East India.
That's really unfortunate.
Since the 1970s, the Pakistani intelligence service, the ISI, has developed into an organization specialized in the use of foreign armed groups and terrorist organizations to disrupt and sabotage the ambitions of Pakistan's rivals. As much as you may hear of similar CIA, KGB, FSB, Mossad, and Revolutionary Guard activities, none of them come close to what the Pakistani ISI has done and accomplished in this field of secret operations. Which is not to say that India didn't try its hands at such. During the 1970s, it provided support for a nationalist terror group in Sri Lanka, the Tamil Tigers, who wanted an independent state for the Tamil people. India did this because Sri Lanka was building bridges to India's Cold War rivals, and India wished to bully Sri Lanka back into its sphere of influence. However, there are also Tamil people in India, who with Tamil Tiger support soon started attacking India, and even assassinated an Indian Prime Minister.
Oof.
Again, play stupid games, win stupid prizes. When we look at the Afghan conflict, we often do so from the Euro-American lens, but it is a good idea to take these glasses off. This conflict is far older than the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. It's also worth reminding ourselves that even though the
Maybe that portion of Sri Lanka should be part of India. The little bit of top portion. Maybe, but hopefully Sri Lanka does not, further going with China. Might lead to bad outcomes.
Americans provided weapons and money, they gave them to the Pakistani ISI.
But otherwise, Sri Lanka is very peaceful and nice, Mostly Buddhist, which is nice, but maybe they need to stick to their ideals a bit more.
And it was Pakistan who took these weapons, created the Taliban, and gave the weapons to the Taliban. But why? Was it really just to get the Soviets out of Afghanistan? No. Afghanistan's relationship with Pakistan has been cold since the beginning. As soon as Pakistan declared independence in 1947, Afghanistan engaged in a policy of trying to destabilize Pakistan. It allied itself with India and supported insurgents crossing into Pakistan to destabilize it. The reason is the before-mentioned Durand Line, Pakistan's western border that cuts through cultures and languages without making any sense. Afghanistan never recognized that border. Afghan leaders have considered much of West Pakistan, especially Pashtunistan, to actually belong to it, and on occasion even laid claim to Balochistan. Throughout the 1950s and 1960s, Afghanistan frequently attempted to incite secessionist rebellions in Pakistan and even conducted military incursions. And that conflict worsened when the Afghan kingdom was replaced by a socialist republic allied to the Soviet Union, because the Soviets supported Afghanistan's claims to Pakistani land. This is when Pakistan decided that it had to destabilize Afghanistan, and it did so by training and sending Islamist insurgents years before the Soviets invaded Afghanistan. The Americans merely involved themselves in something because it was at the time directed against the Soviets, but had no idea of the wider implications, or that this was more a conflict between India and Pakistan than a Middle Eastern conflict. However, the stupid game Pakistan played to secure their national sovereignty won them an extremely stupid prize. Islamism doesn't care about national sovereignty or borders. Once the Pakistani-backed Taliban secured power over Afghanistan, they turned their attention elsewhere. They launched a terror campaign against Iran, whose sheer population they considered to be infidels. This soured relations between Pakistan and Iran, but also turned their sights on Pakistan, creating an offshoot there that started terrorizing the Pakistanis. Pakistan Pakistan, however, keeps continuing its support for terrorist organizations that destabilize Afghanistan, even though those in return support organizations that destabilize Pakistan. Because a stable Afghanistan that can assert itself on the international stage is a threat to Pakistan's sovereignty and potentially its very existence.
Man, Pakistan just, man, so much wrong.
One of India's biggest ambitions beside an internal integration through highways, railroads and security is to find a way out. It wants to become a big market, producer and leader with global recognition. And to do so it has to find ways out into the world. One of the things it needs to do most is to feed the increasingly high energy demand of its growing population. Renewable energy should be an option, but even though India makes promises on that sector, it mostly slacks behind.
Which is super unfortunate. It really needs to keep up, come on.
What it therefore craves the most is natural gas.
But at least they don't contribute as much because there's a large vegetarian population, so they don't have as many, problems concerning the farm, greenhouse gases and farm, because of the farms. Well, actually, you know what? Even though Indians don't eat beef, like Hindus don't eat beef, they actually have a large amount of cows in India, so maybe they still do produce a lot of methane gas. A bit unfortunate.
Gas and oil. And not too far away, there's a lot of natural gas amongst the stands. Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan and Kazakhstan sit on some of the largest natural gas reserves in the world, and all of them are eager to sell. Russia, unfortunately, has enough of its own. Europe has several obstacles in the way. The Middle East has its own. There's a large desert between it and China, so the ideal destination would be India. Remember that corridor which most invaders of India used to use? That same corridor is now one of India's biggest interests to get out into the world. Both India and the Central Asian stands want to have closer ties. 70% of India's energy comes from abroad, which is why India would like to be able to buy gas from the stands. The stands, for their part, are landlocked nations who would enjoy a route to the sea, something India could provide. India and the stands have very warm diplomatic relations, as both sides see nothing but benefits in an internal integration and closer ties. India would be Central Asia's gateway to the world, and Central Asia would provide energy and markets. However, someone stands.
That's really cool. Except freaking Pakistan. Pakistan, god damn it. I mean, Pakistan, honestly, it shouldn't really exist. Should just be part of India.
In the way of that common dream. A gas pipeline, rail
and Balochistan should be free right there, but
track and highway connecting the two regions would have to go through Pakistan and Afghanistan, which
freaking unfortunate.
Pakistan has consistently made impossible, even though Pakistan itself would be set up to profit from such an arrangement.
Oh man, so, they just don't want India to have it? Really?
On the other side of the subcontinent, there would have been another source of energy. Burma has some of the largest natural gas fields in Southeast Asia. Both countries quickly agreed to build a
Bangladesh
pipeline and a trade deal. However, this time something else came in the way. The pipeline would have gone through Bangladesh, to which Bangladesh agreed. When a pipeline goes through a country, that country deserves regular payouts in transit fees by both the recipient and deliverer to the pipeline. And because Bangladesh is a poor country, it negotiated for a high transit fee that caused the project to fail.
Oh man, just be reasonable, alright? It's something, at least. Just be reasonable.
Rather than trying to smooth the situation out by offering economic relief and agreements to Bangladesh, India instead proposed an enormous large pipeline that
oh man, just be reasonable instead. India also needs to be reasonable.
Would have gone around Bangladesh. The consequent constant year-long tedious haggling eventually was too much for the Burmese, who instead made a deal selling their gas
oh, frickin' hell. God damn it.
through a pipeline to China. In many ways, this failure to agree served.
But you know what? Burma could have put that gas to the northeast region instead. And then to the northeast region, they could have put it to the rest of India. So it's not like it's a terrible idea to do that. But, yeah, I guess, you kind of need to do the easier option, so you should have just gone through Bangladesh.
Serves as an example of how India treats Bangladesh like a poorhouse, and how these two countries that could both profit from a closer integration of trade and agreements failed.
Kind of like the opposite of Pakistan and India. So India and Bangladesh needs to be reasonable.
Do so. And on the other side of the subcontinent, it shows how deep the conflicts in that region go for India and who has what interests where. As Pakistan continues to control and shut down that corridor, there will be increasingly more potential for conflict in that region. Which leaves India with only one other way to get out and seek more influence in the world.
And they do have a lot of sea access.
With 7,516 kilometers or 4,671 miles of coastline, you would imagine that India is the unquestionable power in the Indian Ocean. However, that is not the case, and you will
unfortunately
soon see why. One thing that can be said with certainty about India and the Indian Ocean is that it is in a better position than its rival. Pakistan has 1,050 kilometers or 650 miles of coastline. Its coastline might be closer to the important ports of the Gulf. However, most of that coastline is in Balochistan, a rebellious province with armed insurrections and a struggle for independence. The Baloch coastline is also believed to contain natural gas fields. Pakistan's solution to try to keep this coastline and internal security within Balochistan is an extremely risky one. They outsourced the problem to the Chinese. They sold the natural harbors to China and permitted China to build a highway from Kashgar to Gwadar, connecting the isolated western Chinese regions to the Indian Ocean. This may bring investments, but is also extremely risky for Pakistan, as it makes China continuously invested and interested.
I mean, really, China shouldn't even be touching Pakistan or India. They shouldn't even be touching. In ancient times, they were not touching. There should be a country between them.
In the security of the region. If China is invested,
that would help with all the tensions and all that. If there was something in the way.
In the security of that region, the population may resent such. Additionally, who is to say that China will always side with the central government in the future? If the Chinese harbour in Gwadar becomes more important than the needs of the Pakistani government, China might be okay with Balochi separatists as long as they don't touch the Chinese harbour. India, meanwhile, is trying to outfox them both with treaties with Iran to build ports, highways and possibly even pipelines.
That's cool.
Into Afghanistan through Iran. But back to India.
That'd be awesome. And Iran and India, pretty cool places, They could have a good relationship, hopefully.
Its control over the Indian Ocean is not only vital to its security interests, but essential to its ambitions of becoming a superpower. To the west lies the Arabian Sea, to the east lie the Straits of Malacca, which lead to the South China Sea. This connects some of the largest global trade routes in the world between the Middle East, Africa, Europe, to Southeast Asia, Northeast Asia, and Australia. Half the world's trade in oil is conducted on Indian Ocean sea routes, and the total value of all trade conducted on the Indian Ocean routes probably lies in the trillions. And most of this trade goes through a place that has for a very long time been ignored. Sri Lanka is of similar geopolitical significance as the Strait of Hormuz, the Malacca Straits, or the Suez Canal. However, for decades nobody cared much about that place, as it found itself in a decades-long civil war with the Tamil Tigers that nobody wanted to get involved with. The Tamil Tigers would open fire on ships that came too close, so most maritime trade networks went far around Sri Lanka. However, now that the civil war is over, Sri Lanka is back in the limelight, and free countries are lining up for its favor and to try to move it into their own sphere of influence. China already built a harbor there, but the crown jewel in what Sri Lanka has
of course they did.
To offer is a little known place called Trincomalee. Trincomalee is the third largest natural harbour in the world, as well as one of the deepest harbours in the world. This means it is one of the few places in the Indian Ocean that can be used as a submarine base. Add to that the fact that it lies at the convergence of 4 out of 7 of the world's most important trade routes, and you have the attention of every major power that would like to have a base there. Sri Lanka may at first seem to be in an enviable position, where everyone would like to offer it whatever they can to be its friend, but Sri Lanka also has to be careful to not be taken advantage of. The geopolitical interests of free powers collide in this region. Indian, Chinese, and American. For the Americans, the region is vital to its interests in the Middle East, as it is the Pacific Fleet that is used to secure American interests in the region. As such, the Americans have a large military presence in the region and have to continuously secure safe passage for its Pacific Fleet into the Indian Ocean. The Chinese want to control the Indian Ocean. As such, they are built.
Yeah, it would make more sense for India to control it. And India and the US should, be stronger allies in the future, hopefully. The alliance between the US and India hopefully grows more, and, Quad becomes more authoritative and powerful.
Building ports and navy bases throughout the region and managed to get a head start over the Indians. The Indians, for their part, have recently stepped up by increasing investment in Sri Lanka and by building its first foreign military bases. The Indian Navy is also being steadily increased and built up as India pursues the role of being the dominant power in an ocean named after the subcontinent. Only 4% of India's exports go to its direct neighbors, and only 0.5% of its imports come from there. Despite founding SAARC, an organization for trade and cooperation for the Indian subcontinent modeled on the European Union, the countries in it were unable to overcome geopolitical differences and conflicts to build an internal integration of trade and supply with common interests among nations on the subcontinent.
Unfortunately.
This is a hard start for a country in the world stage, as it requires it to go out and find external integration with foreign trade partners and allies. In that pursuit, India has some great advantages. It is seen and by and large is one of China's biggest regional rivals. As such, India is the place to go if you seek to find a partner to work with within competition to China.
Yeah, hopefully.
Its role as a country fighting Islamic terrorism and being a geopolitical rival of China resulted in ever-increasing and closer ties to the United States.
Yeah, makes sense.
In seeking outside markets, one of its closest friends has been Japan, with who they...
Oh yeah, Japan, the United States, Israel. That makes sense for India to be allies.
Attempted to build a maritime trade network into Africa to rival China. India is also an outside quasi
and Australia too, I guess.
Serving member of ASEAN, with the intention of establishing an East Asian to India trade corridor that could rival China. It is also building ever closer ties to Australia by forming an organization for the surveillance and safety and control of the Indian Ocean. India started building ever closer ties to Israel, with common strategic and military interests. Israel provides military training and support in anti-terror tactics and signed its largest arms deal with India, where Russian Kalashnikovs are being phased out and replaced by Israeli weapons. This close and ever-increasing military cooperation between Israel and India is largely unnoticed by the world, and even more curious when you keep in mind that India has a close relationship with Iran, which is mainly due to Iran's relationship with Pakistan being icy at best. And in Europe, India is building ever closer ties with France, while retaining a friendly relationship.
That's good,
With Russia.
Oh, that's not... Our relationship with Russia is not that great, though. But our relationship with France is good.
So of all countries of the subcontinent, India has one of the easiest foreign policy positions to be in. It's welcomed practically everywhere and has many things to look forward to.
If India was closer to Russia, they would not want to be friends with Russia.
Pakistan has a far harder time on the global stage. When it gained independence, its founders, in a very smart move, allied the country with the United States. Both the Soviet Union and India.
The US should not have allied with Pakistan. Should have allied with India.
Wished to undermine Pakistan and possibly even have it dissolved. Allying with the United States gave the country a security shield against that. But its consequent foreign engagements have greatly isolated Pakistan and damaged its reputation in the world. The destabilization of Afghanistan through Islamist militias had far-reaching consequences. One of the first things the Taliban did after they captured Kabul in 1998 was to storm the Iranian embassy and massacre its staff. This was only 20 years after the Iranian hostage crisis, so most of the world reacted with a, well, how do you like it when it's done to you, and forgot about it. But it is important to remember that the Taliban, who were just as brutal as its modern offshoots, launched a campaign of extermination against the Shias and conducted terrorist attacks in Iran. All of it with support of the Pakistani state, and with such brutality that Iran almost invaded Afghanistan themselves between 1998 and 2001. The Iranians have neither forgotten nor forgiven the Pakistanis for their role in all of this, and prefer working with India instead. When the Americans came to Afghanistan, the Pakistanis offered themselves as trusted allies in that conflict. However, the money and weapons the Americans gave to Pakistan were used to enlarge the Pakistani nuclear weapons program instead, and much worse, to support the Taliban, who the Americans were fighting themselves. Continued Pakistani support for the Taliban and destabilization of Afghanistan caused an opium crisis and Taliban offshoots that destabilized Pakistan itself, and caused more and more anger towards it by the Americans, Afghans, and Iranians. But to the Pakistani leadership, a stable Afghanistan was a threat to its own security, so they proceeded, thereby, however, pushing Afghanistan more and more into India's sphere of influence. India is by now building infrastructure and training the Afghan army, and is the most likely country to take a leading role in that region once the Americans pull out. And it was within that context that the United States experienced one of their biggest diplomatic embarrassments in 2008, when Islamist terror groups conducted massive terror attacks with many casualties against the Indian embassy in Kabul and the Indian city of Mumbai. Years later, the Snowden leaks revealed what many had suspected. The Americans had started getting suspicious over their supposed allies years before, so they had started surveilling the equipment they gave to the Pakistanis to fight Islamists, and found that the Pakistanis were giving American assets to Islamic terror groups, and worse, that these American assets had been used in those terror attacks against India. But instead of condemnation by India, what happened instead is a strengthening of ties between the two, as India offered a more reliable friendship. And through that, Pakistan lost its American friends, most of its influence in Afghanistan, and gave its archenemy more power. Pakistan even has trouble finding new friends. When it helped the North Koreans develop a nuclear program, most of East Asia turned its back on them.
Friggin' hell, Pakistan just keeps on doing terrible things.
New friends such as Russia and Turkey turned their backs on Pakistan, since both these countries have terrorism problems and want nothing to do with countries that support terror groups, leaving Pakistan with only two friends: a Saudi Arabia, to which Pakistan is only as useful as its nuclear weapons program in relation to Iran's nuclear weapons program, and China, to which Pakistan is less of a friend, but more like a stick with which it can poke India. Pakistan's friendship with China is also strenuous, since most of the Islamic world is not happy about China's treatment of Muslims, and this consequently made Pakistan,
although Pakistan didn't do anything about it,
even fewer friends in the Islamic club of countries. In foreign policy, Pakistan stands alone and has the most difficult position on the subcontinent. It is distrusted and isolated and has to rebuild trust wherever it can. Going forward, these countries will face continuous challenges. India has ambitions of becoming a superpower, while being hampered by problems such as basic sanitation and catastrophic pollution at home. Bangladesh will have to find a way to overcome its crippling poverty. Sri Lanka will have to be careful to not be taken advantage of by outsiders who seek influence in the region through its advantageous position. And Pakistan is one of the most distrusted places in the world, for which
I think Pakistan just, has to make smarter and more rational decisions and be, more, I guess, moral. Just a more moral country that would help. And not by Islam, I just mean by human rights. But Sri Lanka has a pretty cool flag.
Which it, however, has nobody else to blame but itself. What they all have in common is that they look at external integration and outside solutions for their internal demands and struggles, thereby continuing a further disintegration of the subcontinent. The Indian subcontinent is a place where all its inhabitants would benefit greatly if they could put their conflicts aside, but that, for the foreseeable future, is not going to happen, as the politics of antagonizing and conflict are set to continue. In the next video, we will be talking about Turkey, in a 1 or 2 hour long video about its role in the 20th century, the founding of the Republic, and how its ambitions will shape our future.
Should I watch that video? Recommend me some videos to watch down in the comments too.
There will also be a shorter video about the American lens and how it distorts perception of the world and can thereby contribute to this video summary. I try to not go into too much detail. If you believe there should have been more detail, I could do some more videos later, going more into detail about every single country individually. I certainly now own the books to do so. Speaking of which, you will find a bibliography in the description of all the books used.
Oh yeah, and okay. So that's pretty interesting. You can check out the original video. It will be in the description box below. And yeah, that was a pretty good video by Kraut. Definitely enjoyed it. It was very historical and interesting. Yeah, what can I say? If you enjoyed my reaction, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. And comment down below with your thoughts and whatnot. Thanks for watching.